Hey, 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 it's AAA Wednesday, which stands for Ask Alyssa Anything. This is my weekly Q&A session where I'm sitting down and responding to questions you've left me about the publishing industry, revising your book, writing your book, pitching your book, and anything and everything in between. It's a small way for me to give back to my amazing community of more than 40,000 authors. I appreciate you all so, so much, and I wouldn't keep doing this without all of you. Just 2 pieces of housekeeping before we get into the questions. Number 1, if you can give me a thumbs up, it really helps out my channel in a big way, and I really appreciate it. And number 2, if you haven't yet subscribed, please consider subscribing and joining this amazing community that we've built. In addition to these Q&As, that will ensure you don't miss out on my deep dive videos that I publish on Sundays, where I talk about the publishing industry or a specific aspect of writing. Okay, let's get into the first question today. Hi, Alyssa. I am in this weird stage where I wrapped up writing my book, but I barely revised it, just changed the last 2 chapters, cut a few scenes, and did some copy editing. But I am a diligent plotter and had everything outlined to be as perfect as it could be before even setting about writing the book. And I must admit, I quite like how everything turned out. I might be blinded by the fact that it's my book, my baby, and all that, but I've written 2 novels, which I had to revise a lot until I was satisfied. So I think I've gotten a feel of what a good story is. I don't know. I'm thinking of getting a beta reader, but it's expensive. And honestly, the last 2 times I got someone to read my manuscript, they didn't really suggest much of anything that I didn't already know needs improvement. And I wouldn't really be bothered because I guess I do trust myself somewhat, but I keep hearing about people revising and revising and revising, and I feel like I'm missing out on some huge chunk of work I don't know I have yet to put into my novel for it to be ready to send out to agents. Sorry if this question is long, but I'm just super confused. I really appreciate you laying all of this out so honestly and openly, because I think many authors are feeling exactly what you're feeling. And the fact that you got 3 thumbs up here, I think speaks to the fact that other authors are definitely experiencing this. If you feel confident that your book is achieving the vision that you had for it, and you feel good about sharing it with people and that it delivers the reading experience that you wanted, then it could be possible that you're ready to query and see what agents think of it. This is the point that I want all authors who work with me on developmental editing to get to. The point at which they know the story is as strong as it can be, and they feel confident sending it to agents. They told the story they set out to tell, they feel good about it, they feel it has hit all the points, the messages, the themes they wanted, they feel the characters, the plot holds up. If that all is gelling for you, there's no reason why you can't query a literary agent. There's no rule saying you have to go through huge amounts of revision, or you have to work with a beta reader or a professional editor like myself prior to querying. All that said, if any part of you feels like certain aspects of the story could use development, or you just don't know what you don't know, right? Then it could be beneficial to get other eyes on the manuscript. I do want to differentiate here between a beta reader and a professional editor or a critique partner. You mentioned that you worked with a beta reader before and they didn't really give you too much constructive feedback. A beta read is really kind of a pulse check. You can think of it that way. It is meant to give you overall impressions from someone who could be a potential target reader for you. It's not necessarily someone with extensive editorial experience or an editorial background. So if you work with a critique partner who is another author comfortable in a workshop setting, or a professional editor who has the professional expertise needed to give you editorial feedback, then I believe that the feedback you would get would be quite different from what you got from the beta reader. Again, it is not a necessity to work with either of these types of people before querying or work with anyone at all, and it's certainly something you could consider down the line. So say you want to go ahead and send out a batch of 12 queries or 20 queries because you feel good about the manuscript. If those all come back as rejections, or you get some feedback from agents saying they wish you developed a certain aspect of the story, you can always then turn back to an editor or a critique partner to try to develop on that front, if you don't feel comfortable investing in that type of relationship upfront. The bottom line is there is no rule on when you're ready to query. If you feel ready to query, you should absolutely feel free to do so. But I would encourage you to think hard about if the story is as strong as you feel it can possibly be at this point. And if not, what would help you get to that point? Here's the next question. Would you talk about trigger warnings and when to include them? It seems respectful to include in querying as well. My current manuscript is YA contemporary and deals with some heavy themes, but in a tertiary way. They happen off camera and are described, but hopefully not too graphically. I can speak to trigger warnings as it relates to my experience in the traditional publishing industry. At least at the literary agency and at the publishing house that I worked at, it was not expected or required for authors to provide a trigger warning on their manuscript. Based on the genre you present and the description in the plot blurb, it's likely that agents and editors at publishing houses will be able to gauge if it will deal with some heavier themes or not and set their own reading expectations accordingly. So from that side of things, it's typically not necessary for you to include. Though if you are querying an agent and they do request a content or trigger warning, you should absolutely include that. And if you want to go ahead and include a warning of some sort just to cover all your bases, that is certainly not going to harm your query or your manuscript in any way. And I'm sure agents would be totally okay with you doing that. Before we get into the next question, I wanted to make sure you knew about my newsletter website, chapter-break.com, which is full of other resources just waiting for you. I'm conducting exclusive interviews with top literary agents and best-selling authors, and they're giving some amazing insights that I don't want you to miss out on. To make sure you receive all of these interviews directly in your inbox, all you have to do is give me your email address, and as a bonus, just for signing up to Chapter Break, you will get my story self-assessment worksheet, which is a quiz I designed to help you identify the weaker spots in your manuscript so you can revise and make it even stronger on the next draft. The links to check out Chapter Break and grab your story self-assessment are in the description below. Here's the next question. I am an amateur writer working on my first novel. The more I write, the more places my main character goes and the more side characters I introduce. How do I know if I've introduced too many characters in my story? I think I may want to cut down on the number of characters I have, but being in the messy middle of my manuscript, it is really difficult to gauge this for me. Because you are in the middle of the drafting process, I would recommend first finishing your draft. Because only once you get to the end of the manuscript will you have a holistic view of the entire story, and then you can go back and be super selective with which characters you need to keep and which to remove. As for strategies to figure out what characters are essential or not, once you have a complete manuscript draft, I recommend creating a reverse outline. This is a separate document where you summarize scene by scene what happens in every chapter in your book. Once you have this, I recommend looking at every single character. You could even color code each line where you describe what happens in the scene and color code when each character appears. Is there a scene where a character just appears one time? And if so, are they really necessary in that scene? Or is this a character you could potentially remove entirely so as to not clog up the story with too many secondary characters? Or you may find that there are a couple of characters who are only mentioned a few times, but they could be combined into one single character who has a stronger presence and more of a role in the story. The reverse outline is going to really help you see at a glance which characters are driving the story forward and which are potentially slowing it down or taking us into tangents that aren't necessary. We have time for one more question today. If an agent requests you send them a query through QueryTracker and they ask for a bio and comp titles separately through it, do I need to put them in the body of my query letter as well? I recommend doubling up on any information that an agent asks for separately in their QueryTracker form that's already in your query letter. It's always better to give them all the information in multiple places rather than picking and choosing where you are giving the information, because you never know which document or which form field the agent is going to look at first. So you can feel free to copy and paste information from your query letter as needed, but I would also keep everything in the query letter so that is totally comprehensive as well. That's all we had time for today. Thank you so much to everyone who asked me a question, and if you have something you'd like to ask, drop it in the comments here and it will be added to my queue for my next session. Before you head out, don't forget your free story self-assessment worksheet waiting for you, as well as my newsletter link. Both are in the description below. Give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying these sessions and want me to keep doing them, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. Thanks so much for watching and happy writing.